if you allow your employees to use their own devices, bring their own devices into the corporate network, what sort of exposure does that expose to you and your company, especially when that device can go to these public Wi-Fi hotspots where they're kind of in a danger zone. Maybe they'll get compromised, or maybe they go to a conference and they hook up to some public Wi-Fi and now they're compromised and they bring them back into the corporate network and use them. And you probably, as a company, don't have any sort of management capability of that device like you do with a corporate asset. So I know most companies, ours included, has ways, if it's a company device, we can get information, log data and whatnot, and also make sure that the patches and updates and everything are happening on it, where you won't get that with a bring your own device. So it's an interesting article. He talks mostly about the mitigation steps there of what you could do with these types of devices to make sure that at least they have a minimal level of exposure to vulnerabilities. Whether your users in your company are going to do that, it's just, to me, it was more of, let's think about how to approach bring your own device.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about one of the possibilities, or a smarter approach, as opposed to just bringing your personal laptop in, plug it into the local network at work, and doing whatever on it, having free reign on the network. Maybe you force bring your own device laptops to go to like an hosted virtual desktop or a VM, and that's all they can do. So you have some very constrained network access, maybe just RDP or PC over IP, which is the better version of RDP.
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly a possibility. There are perhaps a number of approaches that could be taken. I think, and I think it's kind of interesting because, as near as I can understand, I think BYOD kind of started out as a use your mobile device because, and be able to access corporate assets with a mobile device. But then there was this dilemma, well, what about, usage charges, and how do you deal with things like that? And so the notion of partitioning, to say, you sort of have a work persona and then you have a personal persona, and to be able to keep those separate. And so there are sort of sandbox type tools that reside on mobile devices to be able to support this thing. And I am going somewhere with this. Okay. That whole concept could, I think it kind of extended in, well, let's take the more general laptop scenario, and you could do sort of the same thing. I don't know that there's a way to clearly partition, but perhaps there is. I don't know of any software tools that really do that. I mean, you could argue maybe you have a VM that's specifically for work, that'd be one perhaps way to do it. But I think, kind of thinking how I would approach this personally, that is, if I wanted to bring my own device to work, I would almost embrace, signing off and say, you know what, manage it as a corporate asset effectively. I get to choose what device I'm using. I get to use it for my things as well, but lock it down. Why should I? I don't really want to have to do all that stuff. I'd rather have somebody else do it. I mean, other than for the learning experience, perhaps. But
the easiest way is probably to do a dual boot with dual encrypted partitions.
That'd be another way to do it as well. Perhaps.
Because that way it makes it a lot harder for the user to accidentally do something on the corporate side that was supposed to be personal, or vice versa.
That's true. I think one of the flaws that you run, and I think this feeds right into the sort of the dilemma, is I think one of the flaws in that thinking is that we rarely are just at work or just at home. I mean, we're living our lives while we're at work. We're living our work while we're at home. And so there's not really a clear separation between the two. So you need to, at the very least, to be able to transition between them very easily, and at best to be able to kind of, in fact, blur the lines and manage that a little bit.
So I kind of equate this to, if I can equate this to something at home, it's our dilemma with IoT devices. So when you're at home and you have an IoT device, you typically don't want that IoT device to sit on the same LAN segment as the rest of your protected components, right? So typically what they, right, exactly. So typically what they say is you should have your IoT devices on a separate network than your, so you should probably be able to do that same thing, that same scenario, and bring it into a corporate environment where you keep things that you don't know about, you think are, you label them unsecure or unknown, and you keep those separated. So things like on, when they come in via VPN, you could, by profile, understanding that this device is not corporate, doesn't, it's not a corporate asset, keep it off on a separate VPN profile, right? And keep it separated from the rest of your corporate network.
Right.
Obviously, you'll have to open certain things up so that they can get to certain things, but keeping it in a separated area, I think, is a smart move.
Absolutely. That's so things can be done with network access control, not assigning DHCP addresses unless the device is authenticated, recognized, and managed and protected in a proper way. And in fact, that's a similar model that's used in MDM, mobile device management, to make sure that if you're providing access to corporate assets, that there's a mechanism to do that and authentication of the device and such.